Afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Vogel, the EVP of Sales and Marketing here at Transportation Impact. Welcome to the next episode of our Let's Talk Ship discussion series. Welcome to the next episode of our Let's Talk Ship discussion series. If you joined our last episode, welcome back. If this is your first time attending, welcome. Our team has developed this series with the goal of providing you with education, ideas, insights, and data related to the ever-changing shipping environment. As we kick off 2021, budgets are approved. We wanted to pick a topic that can set you up for success and one that might align with activities you're conducting right now, like procurement or sourcing. Today, you'll get an outline of how to avoid unnecessary shipping costs this year. We encourage you to ask questions by utilizing the questions section of the GoToWebinar pane. We'll take the time to answer as many as we can at the conclusion of our discussion, and if we can't, we promise to follow up by email. Today, my guest is Marco Pambiano from Omnia Partners. Welcome, Marco.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Marco, I wanted to invite you today for a few reasons. Omnia is one of Transportation Impact's most valued strategic partners. We've enjoyed a successful partnership over the last 4 years. And as one of the largest group purchasing organizations, you have the collective buying power of over $13 billion in spend and have over 100 supplier contracts that you provide to your members. So, for our audience today, I think Omnia brings a lot to the table to discuss on this topic. But you in particular bring a lot to this discussion with your deep procurement experience in companies of all sizes, even Fortune 500 companies. So I really appreciate your time today.
Well, yeah, thanks again for having me. And certainly just want to thank, Transportation Impact. You guys have definitely been a great partner, as you said, for many years. You guys have done a great job working with our member companies. And as you said, we're all about bringing leverage to the marketplace, the $13 billion. And so, certainly we try to help companies save money and kind of be that extra value add to their team. So, thanks again for inviting Omni on to the call today.
Absolutely. Well, let's get started. So let's start at the top. Marco, what is the role of procurement or sourcing in a business?
Yeah, it's the role is definitely critical, right? So procurement, just like HR, legal, IT, some of those major pillars, if you will, within a company, procurement is right there as well, alongside them. Of course, procurement has to help a company save money, right? That's a given. But ultimately, procurement is there to help kind of navigate the supplier landscape, right? With the goal of, really selecting the best supplier that's going to bring the most value to the organization. Any good procurement professional is going to follow a methodical process to get there, right? So if you're kind of looking at on the front end process really includes a lot of time spent around due diligence, right? So if we're looking at, for example, talking to the stakeholders, it's extremely important for procurement to get that voice of the customer so that they understand, what is important to the stakeholders, what's important to the business, what are those requirements that stakeholder is looking, right, from a supplier. So it's extremely important to certainly get the feedback from stakeholders. Research is always, part of the initial process as well, trying to understand what's going on in the industry. The industry within certain categories is constantly evolving and changing all the time. So what maybe was kind of commonplace 5 years ago might be something very different today. So certainly getting a good sense for that. I'd also say too that, part of that vetting process is really understanding, what suppliers exist in the marketplace, and really trying to understand, who are the top ones, who are the key ones. So, that's a big important element as well. And then, of course, negotiating the contract to get favorable pricing terms and conditions. But then once the contract is established, procurement must also be able to manage that supplier relationship going forward and measuring the performance of the supplier and make sure that they're providing the value, right, that they put in place and that they expected. So there's a lot there that procurement is focused on, and they do a lot more than just negotiate the lowest price, right? That's table stakes, that's a given in their role, but procurement brings a lot of value to their function and to the organization's overall goals of, really just providing successful products and services to their customer base.
Yeah, and for our customers, Marco, we work with a wide range of size companies as well. And so for us, sometimes it's the VP of supply chain who has that procurement role as well as the VP of supply chain role. We have companies too that we work with that also have fully baked procurement departments, but sometimes it's the logistics manager who has that responsibility. So, let's talk a little bit more about that front end vetting, Marco, because I think that's important just to dig into and provide our audience a few examples. That selection process is really important. So what are some of the boxes for procurement and sourcing teams? What are some of the boxes they should check during due diligence?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a critical part, and companies must partner with a strong supplier, right? So there's a lot of check boxes, if you will, that they need to kind of work through. And let's face it, there's hundreds of thousands of suppliers out there, right? And in any given category, you could have 1,000 suppliers in that space. So I think it's important to spend the time up front and put the time and effort in to make sure that you're doing a thorough evaluation, right, and due diligence, because in the end, it's going to be well worth it, because what everybody is trying to have is a long-standing supplier partner, right? So I guess first kind of talking about some of the different components within that vetting process. And, as I kind of get into this, let's sort of keep in mind that the level of scrutiny that I would say is going to often depend on how strategic that particular category is to the business, right? So, if that category has, for example, significant spend tied to it, or if that category and that supplier is critical to, let's just say that the end product that the company is making and selling, there's going to be a high level of scrutiny in that space, right? You cannot have anything go down. And it's going to have more scrutiny than other suppliers or categories that are maybe non-strategic or kind of transactional in nature. So procurement has to do a high level market evaluation, right? So I kind of talked a little bit about the industry overview and doing some of that research to understand, what's going on in that space and kind of where is that industry headed. I'd say a lot of companies use or leverage, procurement leverages a lot of outside kind of publications and associations to gather a lot of that intel. Certainly Gartner is kind of one of those, and we've all heard of the Magic Quadrant where they cover certain categories. That's a great source for procurement to understand, again, what are all the dynamic elements of that category and who are some of those key suppliers. But I think too, more so now than ever, one of the biggest things in terms of one of those check boxes is that supplier going to be financially sound, right? I'm seeing a lot of companies put a lot of focus on this element because of the pandemic, right? It has shined a very bright light in that space. And, unfortunately, the pandemic has hurt a lot of businesses. Some suppliers are no longer around, other ones are still struggling. So again, just making sure that that supplier that you're about to do business with is extremely financially healthy and stable. Compliance is also another component, right? There's a lot of regulatory requirements out there in different categories, and so making sure that that supplier is in compliance of those. Insurance, insurance is something that is kind of often overlooked, but making sure that that supplier carries the right, coverage, right, for that particular service or good. So some of those are very important. And then also too, I would say just in general, just having reference calls. Again, I think it carries a lot of weight to get the feedback of other customers of that supplier. You can get a lot of intel from those types of conversations. And so, although I think that can also be overlooked at times, I think it's absolutely critical to just get that feedback as well from customers. So there's a lot out there, obviously, to consider in the vetting process, but I think that some of these that I've highlighted are kind of some of the more important ones, especially in today's environment with COVID and everything else that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really speaks to risk assessment, right? Are they financially stable? Can they help us meet our business goals? Have I talked to enough of their customers? And for our clients, it's a little bit trickier since there are only a few carriers to choose from in the small parcel world and many to choose from in the truckload and less than truckload space. But it's still important to assess things like what's their percentage of on-time delivery? Can they meet your last pickup time of the day? For the services you use, do you need weekend pickups? What's the closest hub so you can assess on-time delivery? I could go on and on, but so let me ask you this, Marco. Would you consider shipping a strategic category?
I would. I think for most companies, shipping is going to be a very large spend, and it's definitely something that's not going away, right? So procurement all the time is talking about just different ways to right size a particular category and maybe reduce some of the demand, or just different ways to kind of shave off cost savings. But I think in the shipping category, it's a little bit more challenging to do that. And if the product has to get out the door and go to a customer, for example, it has to be done. So you can't really change that. So it's important to just optimize what you do have and negotiate, of course, the best contract you can. If you look at UPS and you look at FedEx, I mean, these companies right now are just doing extremely well, right? From a macro level, the demand is skyrocketing. More products are being purchased now, right, via the web than ever before. So, companies are relying on them. And again, the spend in this space is becoming very strategic. So it's just another indicator that the shipping industry is here to stay. Same thing with freight carriers, right? You kind of alluded to that earlier. It's a very fragmented industry with thousands of carriers in that space. So that in and of itself presents a challenge for procurement to match and find the best supplier that's going to match the footprint of that organization and be able to meet their needs. To reiterate, I guess some of the importance that I find through this example is through an example, I guess, that I had recently talking to an organization and kind of anecdotally hearing from them a situation where they had selected at one point an LTL carrier, right, due to the lowest cost. And unfortunately, procurement didn't do a great job, diving into all the different elements of quality and service and the reference calls, talking to customers and things of that nature. So, although pricing was good, the company, of course, started to have some issues with some damaged products and just other servicing issues. So we all know that this is, part of growing pains of any, new relationship, but because it was persistent, it caused a lot of issues within that company and a lot of rework. And so time wasted is, of course, something that, time is precious to all of us. We're all so busy. So you can't necessarily take a lot of time to kind of go back and try to, start it all over again. So it's really important, I think, essential to get it right the first time. But again, I think it just reinforces the importance of performing that due diligence on the front end, especially when you're looking at shipping, because of all these examples around, how shipping is a strategic category and it's here to stay, right?
Yeah, and if a company loses a key supplier, to your point, it's going to negatively impact operations, sales. I mean, the trickle down effect of choosing the wrong supplier is vast. For us, we don't provide carrier recommendations on the freight for less than truckload and truckload. We do provide some recommendations and help clients negotiate. But on the small parcel side, we don't tell them what carrier to choose. We just lay out the financial business case, the data, the facts, and we let the client choose. We've seen migrations go wrong or take too long, but the good news is, to your point, shipping is here to stay, and there's always a carrier willing to take your business. So how do some companies maybe minimize the risk of choosing the wrong vendor within due diligence or maybe just outside of it?
Yeah, I'd say the process is really going to vary across company, right? We talked earlier about some of the things to focus on, right? Such as looking at a company's financials, are they healthy? Looking at the regulatory compliance, things like that. And all this can be done in-house to some degree. But what I find a lot of companies, best in class companies doing, are layering in some sort of service technology as well, right? So there's companies like a Dun & Bradstreet, a Rapid Ratings, Thomson Reuters, companies like this that augment procurement's efforts in some way, right? We're all stretched so thin these days, and procurement can only do so much. So companies that I'm finding best in class are tapping into these kind of resources to help them along and making the best decisions possible. So it helps on the front end, right? Certainly, but also it carries well beyond that contract signature. Because the landscape always continues to change. And let's face it, things situationally could change with that supplier as well. So always having a good sense for that risk profile and being predictive, I think, is extremely important. Um, Procurement and vendor management, right, certainly must stay very close to this. And what I also find is some companies will actually outsource that function altogether. Again, on the front end, right, when they're doing that initial kind of due diligence, but also ongoing, right, making sure that the companies and the suppliers are financially stable, as an example. Actually, Omnia Partners, one program that we have is with a company called GRMS, which is kind of what I'm talking about. Is an end-to-end solution that does that real-time monitoring. So it's not a snapshot in time, right? But it's also proactively looking at, are there any issues or changes going on with that supplier? Are they getting into financial trouble, right? That way, companies can be more proactive, right? When potentially there's an issue that's on their hands and they don't have to react to something when it's too late, right? Ultimately, the goal that I would say of any procurement professional is to put the right safeguards in place, right? To ensure that that continuity of supplies and goods are there from that supplier, all while protecting, of course, that company brand.
Absolutely. So let's dig into that, to the back end, that vendor management piece just a little bit more. This is truly where the rubber meets the road, really truly integrating your procurement activities with managing the vendor that you've chosen. So what are some of the things that clients should be looking at when they're putting together a vendor management plan?
Yeah, I talked a lot about managing or minimizing the supplier risk, but I think also managing the supplier performance is also important, and how that supplier is meeting the needs of the organization over time, right? So digging into that aspect just a little bit, one way to do it is to establish, key performance indicators, or KPIs, right? And it can vary by category, because every category is going to have a little bit of a different flavor in terms of what it is you're requiring from that supplier. But for example, is the product being delivered on time? What's the turnaround rate? What's the fulfillment rate? Is that pricing still competitive? Does it remain competitive over time? The idea, though, around all this is just ensuring that, well, establishing really that criteria on the front end and ensuring that that supplier is meeting the performance and those expectations that were kind of outlined in terms of the KPIs. And so really, in any case, right, you must measure those and track those over time. So it's not just a day one type thing, but it's also in year 3 and 4. Is that supplier still growing with us? Are they still meeting the KPIs and meeting our needs? And I think a big avenue for expressing kind of how that supplier is performing is through business reviews. Business reviews, I think, are extremely important, just to kind of bring it all together and level set with the stakeholders there as well. What it is, how the supplier is performing, first of all, right? Are they meeting the needs of the supplier, of the stakeholders? But also getting that feedback from the stakeholders too, right? What's working well, what's not, how do we improve, any sort of lingering issues. I've been part of some pretty tough conversations and pretty tough business reviews and in the past with different suppliers, and it can be a tough conversation, but what I've always found is that longer term, as long as we kind of right the ship, if you will, I think that it just strengthens the overall relationship between the company, procurement, as well as the supplier. So again, I think just managing that supplier in a constant, an evolutionary way, right? Because it's not going to always be kind of linear, if you will, right? Sometimes we got to, change it up, if you will. But it's important, again, to just establish what those KPIs are on the front end, and then measure those over time and making sure that everyone's fully aligned.
Yeah, I love that long-term view, Marco, because I can't tell you how many clients we come across, or I would say probably prospects before they become clients, where they haven't had a business review with maybe their small parcel representative, and they've completely outgrown their agreement. As you grow in business, you get small incremental increases in discounts or better pricing, but if your volume starts to drop, you get penalized. So as you grow, you're not really getting value out of the agreement. So it's important to stay close to things like that. So we do business reviews with with many of our clients, and we're always finding ways to help add value to those relationships. And you're right, sometimes they are tough conversations, but they're important. So now let's shift and talk about, how you can do that easily and effectively. At the front end and vendor management for us, and this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, we advise our clients to reach to technology to help them with vendor management. So what role do you think, Marco, does digital transformation play in procurement?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest technology drivers that I am personally seeing right now is really the implementation of systems like a procure to pay platform, right? Or commonly referred to as P2P. Some of the most common names out there, of course, are going to be like the Coupa and the Arebas and GEP. And of course, within the P2P platform, there could be a lot of different modules around spend analysis and contract management. But really, I think one of the biggest advantages that I see with this specific technology is it enables procurement to more effectively put controls around their spend and really their ability to drive better buying behaviors with the organization. Spend visibility, I think, is also another big advantage. This technology gives procurement a method and a means to really harvest meaningful data from around what is being purchased across their organization, right? And we all know how important spend visibility is, and being able to take this and make better business decisions with what the company is buying. So this technology, I think brings a lot of value to the company, but without a doubt, it serves as a major asset for procurement. And procurement has got a lot of different goals and initiatives internally, and I think that this procurement enables them to better fulfill and meet what those are for the company.
Absolutely. And I also think there's a place for BI tools in procurement and sourcing. So BI tools are so flexible. You can pull in ERP data, you can pull in shipping data, or manufacturing and warehouse data, add in your KPIs, build some dashboards, and done, and in a relatively short period of time in an easy way. I know I'm way oversimplifying it, so I hope IT isn't listening, but tools like that benefit everyone in an organization, and often really not that expensively if you look at your ROI numbers as it relates to time saved within your organization and savings that's been generated. So Marco, in your opinion, who can benefit most from these platforms?
I see advantages for really all types of companies, but I'd probably say that when I see the most companies seeing the most benefit from it would be those that come from decentralized environments, right? And those where it's been just historically very difficult to control spend compliance. And I'll give you an example, and I see this all the time. Companies that are growing rapidly, right, especially through mergers and acquisitions, these companies tend to have more decentralized environments. They're moving quick, right? So you have multiple locations, you have multiple divisions with buyers spread out across the entire country. So corporate may try to put a national program in place, and it could be a best-in-class contract, but when it comes to implementation, it can be very difficult and a challenge to really get everybody into compliance. So. Yeah. And let's face it too, right? Sometimes people don't like change, and other buyers, they may have relationships for 10 years with, their incumbent, they don't want to switch. And so it can be very difficult. And in the end, what that is just low compliance for the company, missed cost savings and leakage. So the P2P platforms, I think, once those are implemented, I see procurement finally having those controls at their fingertips to really dictate better buying through preferred spend channels. And I think too, another benefit for them is that, suppliers, I think, love it too. It shows that compliance can be attained within that organization. So for them, spend under management is extremely important because, if there's a certain level of spend out there that is going to be awarded to them, if they know that, hey, it's not theoretical, we're going to try to get it, but hey, it's there, we have the tools in place that are going to funnel that spend to you. I see suppliers giving more favorable pricing terms and conditions, right? It's easier for that account manager, for example, to get approval on better pricing, as an example. So again, I think all companies can benefit from a technology like this, but definitely those that struggle with compliance, those companies will probably benefit the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Data, I can't tell you how many times we come across clients that are just struggling to get the data needed to even assess opportunities, particularly in decentralized organizations. So you're so right. So the problems that these types of technologies solve, and you mentioned this earlier, Marco, obviously cost savings, compliance, and then better spend visibility. We've also here at Transportation Impact, we've been discussing control in our organization and how can our products enable our clients to gain control over their spend so they can solve business problems, on their own. It's been an interesting topic to discuss, but we always come back to the data and the technology shippers need to take control so you can achieve those three things. So it's 2021. The world is different. We've all had to make adjustments in our business to adapt. Those that aren't faring very well or at all, which is so unfortunate for many reasons. Marco, with all of your experience, what advice do you have for procurement or vendor management professionals managing in today's environment?
I'd say first and foremost, it's just given ample time, right, to thoroughly review, do a deep dive assessment of the category, and develop a strategy, right? Timing is, of course, going to depend on the category itself, how strategic in nature it is, and of course, any current contractual language that they may have with the incumbent. But I'm always a huge proponent of creating alignment as well with key stakeholders. I think a successful procurement team needs to be able to connect with their stakeholders and be viewed as a valuable asset. And I always say that procurement is kind of like an internal sales job in a way, where procurement is always looking to drive more influence, within the organization. And one way, of course, to do that is to, certainly be viewed as a valuable resource to your stakeholders and a trusted resource. So if you do a good job for them, you help them achieve their goals, then what that does is going to essentially help them, achieve their goals a little bit quicker. Mm-hmm. But I've also seen procurement successfully leverage our resources here at Omnia too. One thing that we have within our resources and our team is a whole handful of just different subject experts that are in place to address complex categories like an MRO or temp staffing. And so these people that we have made investments in allow our procurement contacts to tap into their resource, their knowledge base, and bring them into conversations with stakeholders. And what I found is that it immediately achieves instant credibility with that procurement stakeholders. And again, they just kind of build on it from there. So again, yeah, I think that, really procurement needs to start basic. They need to start early, begin preparing, developing a strategy. The more time that you have to plan, I strongly believe that the better outcome is for procurement to not only deliver that financial value, right, the cost savings for the company, but also locking in a strong supplier partner for the long term.
Yeah, and some of the other things, that we talked about, Marco, were, build a strategy, make sure you have the market intelligence, align your key stakeholders. And really, I think that all boils down to having really strong and very clear policies and procedures in your organization when it comes to procurement and sourcing, no matter what department it lives in, whether it lives in procurement or it lives in the shipping department, or each department handles their own procurement activities. But policies and procedures, I think, it makes things very clear and easy to follow for everyone in the organization.
Yep.
So we do have a few questions from the audience. I'll start with this one. If a company has interest into finding out more how Transportation Impact and Omnia platform can help our organization shipping program, how would we get started in understanding how it works? Well, this is the first step, but Marco and I will reach out to you and maybe set up a time to have an initial 15-20 minute conversation about your business, and we can align how we can help for sure. This next one, you mentioned the importance of cultivating supplier relationships. How do you make sure the supplier is fully aligned and bought into the company's mission?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you think about it, certainly procurement and the company, they're going to have their goals and they're going to see the importance, right? But it's also aligning with that supplier to make sure that they share in the same goals and expectations as well. So I think kind of along those same lines, it's really kind of sharing what are those expectations, with that supplier, and what is procurement expecting from them. Talked a lot about the KPIs earlier on as well. I think that clearly defining what those KPIs are, tracking to those, and making sure that everyone is fully aligned from that aspect, certainly will help, I think, as well. But then I think too is, always sharing what are those growth opportunities. Are there growth opportunities, for example, within the company? Suppliers are always looking to grow, of course, and kind of continue to grow within that particular customer base. And so if they're doing a great job for them, then what I always find is that procurement is much more willing to bring them in to maybe other functions within that company, to maybe explore, other opportunities with other customers, other stakeholders within the company. So again, I think just fully aligned on what those expectations are, and just kind of tracking towards those.
Yeah, and good partnerships start with good contracts. And if KPIs can be established early and that can be a part of your contract discussions, by all means, do that. Another question is, it sounds like Omnia Partners has significant leverage in the marketplace across your programs. I'm sure better pricing is a given, but are there any other benefits your suppliers give to companies that are part of the Omnia contracts?
Yeah, I think outside of price, of course, Omnia Partners, our contracts, for many of our contracts, we are going to be collectively a top 5 customer to our suppliers, if not the largest customer. So immediately what that says is that any member, any company that becomes a member and joins one of these contracts, they are going to get immediate customer of choice status, right? So with that, there are lots of layers of support that our suppliers also provide to the members and to those that are joining the contracts. So, of course, you have your account rep and all, you have Omnia Partners behind the scenes. We have more support. Oftentimes that supplier is going to give us a dedicated resource that is fully 100% aligned to the Omnia book of business. Again, just making sure that the program is working well, that those members that are on our contracts, that we're all collectively meeting their needs. So there's a lot of layers to support that. Savings are great, but also you need to have a good support system in place. And we're all in it for the long haul, so we want to make sure that we're all providing value back to our members.
That's right. Yeah, Transportation Impact shares that same philosophy. It has to go beyond just good pricing and cost savings. Procurement's really looking to build a good partnership and a trusted advisor. So from our discussion today, Marco, I've got 3 takeaways on how shippers can avoid unnecessary shipping costs in 2021. So integrate your procurement activities with vendor management. You got to have the front end and the back end of that process. Leverage technology if your company is able to do that. Some of the pay to procure companies that Marco mentioned, or business intelligence tools. And then the third is set policies and procedures for procurement and vendor management activities. It's very important that everyone in your company and all of your stakeholders, internally and externally, are aligned. So, Marco, thanks so much for joining me. I think this was a really great discussion.
Thanks again for having me on here. We greatly value the partnership that we have with Transportation Impact, so appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
Absolutely. To our audience, thank you for being here as well. This webinar will be available post this discussion via our follow-up email, as well as LinkedIn and our blog. For those who provided their mailing address, you're going to receive your very own professional Ship Talker pin. If you did not provide your mailing address, no worries. You can simply respond to our follow-up email with your address and we'll ship one out to you. We hope to see you on the next Let's Talk Ship discussion series.